Hello and welcome to another video. So today we're taking a look at Distain Dragon, a deck that pretty much people thought were dead. I mean, I've seen a lot of people talk about completely getting rid of their Omen of Distain. I mean, I don't see the point. Omen of Distain is still quite a good card, even with the changes. Most of the time, you're really only pinging her effect once. There was only a couple of matchups where you'd be pinging it more than once, most typically in the Shadow or Forest matchup, which right now isn't a surprise. So honestly, this card just still retains as much value as it kind of had, even if it is on the just lesser side. If I had to say out of overall, I would say, the old card was, let's say, a 8 to 9 out of 10. The new one is probably around a solid 7, so definitely still worthwhile, and I wouldn't be throwing this card away by any means, as I think it will probably remain a pretty strong card in Dragon decks in the future. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this, and we'll get right into it. So this Distain deck is definitely a more ramp dragon sustain deck, a little different to the, of course, aggro variants that were in the past, as you can't take full advantage of course, Omen of Distain's full-on aggro glory, which is just pinging as much as you could against low decks as fast as you could. You definitely want to play slightly slower and take more advantage of Huge Storm, which is always a good thing, and then use Omen of Distain as kind of just a little bit of extra damage to help you get to those final big storm followers. So you basically just change how you use the card more than anything, which, depending on the deck you're playing to begin with, really decided on how Omen of Distain was used. So starting off with a pretty average hand, there isn't a lot we can do with it. I mean, we've got a couple of solid 2-drops now, but having to wait so long to play them does set us back slightly. Sylvian Justice hurts, as I would have liked to have got the draw. But, I mean, we're not in the worst situation here. We're going to get a chance to play Zoe for a draw. And we're going to use Commander, so why not? Can also use a 1-3 to trade off. And next turn we have the Evo, which will probably be used on Dragon Sword for more ramp. Which will also drop Iron's Dahaka. Dahaka? It's Dahaka, not Drahaka. Some people corrected me in the past. Hard to change pronunciations though, once they're kind of set in your mind. So we're actually looking at a pretty promising turn. We can pretty much wipe this board out at this point without much issue, while still taking advantage of our ramp, taking us up to 7, which means next turn we will be on 8. Just one off that Aizrahaka, which, I mean, if we keep this 1-2 around, would be a real easy Evo, but considering a Peerless Shot has been played, doubt that's going to happen. A lot of people complained about Flores, but I think, honestly, Peerless Shot is super abusive 4-drop. While it doesn't come out super early, which, I mean, is great, it's still extremely powerful for a 4-drop. Practically being able to clear any big drop, well, pretty much it can actually clear pretty much any drop with its Peerless Shot. There isn't many followers that will survive a 8 hit, like, especially in kind of the mid-game-ish where Peerless Shot's played. And then it'll kill pretty much any mid-drop with a 5 damage, so pretty much guaranteed to 2 or 3 for 1 when it comes to cards with that, so pretty nuts. So they did decide to just wipe that out. They did a pretty decent job of it too. Fortunately, this is where something like Omen of Distain is actually pretty good. While it is going to become a 5-1, we're going to get the 3 damage to face and clean this up for very little cost, really, so definitely worthwhile. Cora, Ravishing Designer, no surprise there. And we're actually pretty comfortable now, especially since we drew Poseidon. We can go face for 5, set up our Poseidon, have a pretty solid board, and be ready for Eyes. There's not a lot Forest can do on turn 8 to really counter this, not that I can think of anyway. The ward is definitely a nice one, as it is going to slow us down, but it's only going to barely slow us down. Especially since we drew the Disdainful Rend. Alright, so we got the draw, and with a quick trade-off we're going to wipe the board with Frenzied Drake, going to turn 9. Pretty okay. Our opponent hasn't played enough to take advantage of their Sky Devouring Horror, which, if you're counting, was pretty obvious at that point. So just getting 6 damage is nowhere near enough. And we've got more than enough with this storm here to go for lethal. And even if we didn't, we could have dropped Zoe, protect ourselves for a turn, and set up for the turn after anyway. And again, we have another Forest matchup. It's no surprise, as I mentioned. Forest seems to take up the majority of my ladder, so it's not bad that Dragon versus Forest is usually pretty decent. But overall, I had very little trouble playing Dragon in the current meta, as Dragon just always does a pretty good job. Similar to Sword, always doing a reasonably good job in fresher metas where things aren't 100% defined yet. Of course, by the time this video comes out, the meta should be in a pretty stable place, but I still don't see it shifting too much from when I'm making this, which is about 4 days into the meta at the moment, as of this video. Once you kind of get to the 4 to 5 day mark, you really know where it's going to settle, at least for the next couple of weeks. Unless some random shift happens. But we will have the mini expansion coming up. We don't have a date for that yet, but expect that to be soon. I'm sure by the time this does go out, you guys will have a date, and I'll probably post it on my Twitter if you guys are interested. So, going for a pretty easy hand if you've watched this game so far, pretty much just playing out on curve as much as you can, taking advantage of ramp where possible, and beating down your opponent's fairy boards before they can really develop into anything dangerous. And of course, we're pretty set. I actually kind of like these 2 breath cards. They're definitely got a lot of utility to them, and they do a really nice job. We're in a little bit of trouble though, as I don't have a way to deal with all these immediately, but drawing Distain is perfect. That gives us the optimal way to deal with this board now. Literally just play Distain and clear them out. That's why I still quite like this card, even when it's not doing exactly what it needs to, it's still getting value. Plus, it pretty much is a pseudo ward at this point because it forces the fact that it has to be removed as soon as possible, and that is always a good thing. If any of you guys don't know what pseudo ward means, it's basically something that has to be removed, basically acting as a ward, stopping your opponent from really being able to do anything else before they clear it. Aizdrahaka is going to do a wonderful 8 damage to our opponent. Completely neglect the board though, because Frenzied Drake is a thing, so may as well use that instead next turn. And considering our current hand, we should survive pretty easily. But of course, our opponent threw us a curveball with Leaf Man, pretty much negating any chance we had at wiping this, which is a little disappointing, as it would have been much easier to deal with if I could have just played Frenzied Drake. 2 breaths again though, on turn 9, does a wonderful job of picking up 2 clears. Using our eyes is going to clear another one, and all that's left is a measly 1/1 that isn't going to have much advantage to it. Our only real risk is turn 6, where they could play Sky Devouring Horror. That is probably the only risky card left now. So we do have to take a little bit of a chance here. So we are pretty much going to just wipe this out and go face. There's no reason not to at this point. So it's Sky Devouring Horror or bust for our opponent. And Goblin is a pretty good indicator that it's not going to be Sky Devouring Horror. So the odds on killing us now is 0. And that is going to be our victory. So I hope you guys did enjoy this video. I quite enjoy playing this deck. It's definitely got its ups and downs overall, but Omen of Distain still doing a wonderful job. Can't fault it for the card it is. It's definitely good. The only card that's weird in this deck I found is Cetus, but I mean, he definitely has some value. I mean, killing the lowest card can also mean killing the highest card if there's only one on board, so he's got some value. He's a fun little card, so hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hit the like button, subscribe. Find deck list in the description below. Until next time, see ya.